Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here this morning. So, where is everyone logging in from? Would be just good to know where you're logging in from. Abhishek and I, we're based out of Gurgaon in India.
Hi everyone.
Nice. All right. So I think what we can do is, maybe Abhishek, we can start off with a quick introduction from our end. And I know we have a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about CPO priorities. We're going to talk about organizations, their business needs these days, how procurement is managing them, pricing, so many things that we have on our agenda, right? So we should really, get started. So what I'll do is I'll quickly maybe give an introduction of myself, and I'll ask Abhishek also to do the same, and then we can get right into it, right? All right. So I'm Bhanushi, and I'm a practice director at Everest Group, and I lead our sourcing and vendor management team, which basically means that I work a lot with CPOs, VMO leaders, as well as procurement professionals on their supply-based engagement strategies. So think about, portfolio rationalization, think about driving cost savings, think about strategic sourcing, category management. All of these are areas that my team supports in. So it's nice to be here this morning. Abhishek, do you also want to give a quick intro?
Sure, thanks Manushi. Hi everyone, Abhishek Sharma. I am a managing partner with the firm and lead our commercial and solution analytics practice. Basically, anything to do with price benchmarking, contract reviews, and the commercial side of the sourcing business. That's where me and my team come in. As Manushi mentioned, both of us are based out of our Gurgaon offices. And yeah, glad to be here. There's a ton of stuff to cover. So Manushi, we can maybe get started.
Definitely, yeah. So this is, meant to be sort of, we're going to have a lot of conversation between me and Abhishek today. We're going to be discussing a lot of things, but we would really love it if, the audience can also sort of comment, keep, asking questions maybe, and we can sort of address questions on the go. This is a live session, right? So we want to make it as live as possible. We want to make it as interactive as possible, right? All right. So I think the first thing we wanted to talk about is just organizational agendas as a whole, right? We've done a lot of surveys recently. We're currently running our typical, the classic key issues survey through which we're trying to understand what are organizational priorities, what is happening in the global services market, and so on and so forth. And what we found through all of these studies at an aggregate level is that organizations are still very, very focused on cost pressures. This is the key challenge that they're facing, right? So inflation-induced cost pressure is one of the key challenge that is out there in the market. And following that, the second challenge is managing supply chain disruptions. So when you think about the second challenge, geopolitics has been a big theme this year, trade wars, regulatory challenges, all of these are really, really big themes these in the past year, and organizations are really trying to focus on how to manage this. Now, if you think about CPOs, you think about procurement leaders, they sort of come at the forefront when it comes to managing these challenges, right? Because cost year-on-year savings target that is just increasing as we go along. Right, so they have actually set a very high year-on-year savings target this year, and despite all the supply chain disruptions, risk management activities that we have to do, our savings target is still at an all-time high. Now, the main, sort of way that we get procurement to drive these sort of cost objectives is through suppliers. So I think I'll bring in Abhishek at this point in our conversation. And Abhishek, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you feel organizations, CPOs are actually getting their service providers or their suppliers to meet these particular objectives?
Yeah, Manashi, just adding to what you mentioned, all of the things around, trade, geopolitics, they have a bit of a dampening effect on any kind of spend, right? So that obviously leads to, of course, there are cost pressures, and then that also leads to on the service provider side, right? How do they tackle and make sure that they are well placed to support their enterprise clients on that? So a few things. One, of course, discretionary spend gets hard to come through. Even for operational work, there is a lot more focus As you mentioned, the key issues survey, I'm really keen to see what the story is now. But even last year, costs suddenly came to the forefront from a couple of years back in rank 4 or rank 5, right? When we're talking about the great resignation, no one thought about cost. It was about, hey, take the money, give me talent, please, right? Now it's like, okay, yes, there's talent. Now let's talk about money. So this kind of things keep these kinds of things keep on happening. I think, one of the things which this has led to, and it's with some serious thought, is providers looking at their own kind of cost rationalization elements, which can be passed on via kind of some specific elements. It could be SG&A cost optimization. So we're seeing a lot of interest from providers from their side, looking at, hey, what's their cost base when it comes to travel, general, administrative. They're looking at their delivery models, tier 2, tier 3 kind of locations, how that, or looking at alternate kind of talent pools, which they may have tried during the COVID rush timeframe to fill up talent. But if that's been useful and it comes at a lower cost, that can be passed on. And then finally, there is of course, the whole point around making operations efficient through Gen AI, right? Gen AI technology interventions, whatever we may call it. So that's definitely on the service provider side. Now, from a CPO perspective, right, the levers being used definitely are shorter deal tenures. Enterprises want high velocity outcomes in shorter deal tenures, right? So that's why the very long term contracts seem to be far and few in between. The only exception sometimes that we see when CPOs or strategic sourcing leaders may go in for a longer term contract, it would be for things which may not see that much of technology intervention, right? Or the deal being offered is too good to be true. Some kind of a sole source discount. Overall, there's a great degree of happiness. There's no desire to go competitive for that. But in general, right, shorter deal tenures are the norm. I talked about the whole productivity through service providers, Gen AI, chatbots, higher resource productivity, getting more from the same resource, right? There's also people cost management, right? Or people spend management from the CPO side, if I may. Rates definitely are not being increased, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we talk about the pricing trends per se. Now, providers, that means they are increasing, finding increased market pressures, right? But because attrition is a bit in control, there's definitely not as much pressure to keep on giving significant hikes year on year. So they're being able to manage, right now it's in a kind of a balanced phase. But any movement here and there could then again disrupt the whole equilibrium, right? Finally, I think there's a lot of shoring location mix optimization happening. Again, due to COVID, when people understood that pretty much a lot of stuff could happen completely remotely, 90 to 95% offshore leverage is now not uncommon to see, right? And that
Right.
too, including tier 3 and tier 4 cities in India. So those are kind of some of those elements which seem to be contributing to the whole, how to get through this cost optimization
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah. So many interesting points you mentioned there, Abhishek. Like, I think on just this whole location mix optimization aspect, right? I was looking at our data recently, and it seems that in the new center setups, APAC actually is leading the way, right? Around 65% of the new center setups are in APAC geography itself, which is amazing to see, right? We have all of these nearshore geographies, all of these offshore geographies, but APAC is sort of leading the way, with India being at the forefront within that market. So I think you also mentioned an interesting point about tier 3, tier 4 cities, how more centers are being set up in those type of locations. So there's a lot of upcoming sort of rise within the tier 3, tier 4 cities, and that cost leverage is being used a lot in that case. So a lot of interesting points I think you mentioned there, but I'm going to focus on just one point, going forward, because I think we should really talk about it, right? Very popular topic. Productivity and AI, right? You talked a lot about how the deal tenures are becoming shorter, and it's very rare that okay, there will be still a long-term deal tenure if there's some amazing thing being offered by service providers and everything. Now, if we bring in the conversation around innovation back, right? Last year, I think we saw a lot of data wherein the organizations were very dissatisfied with their service providers. And this year, I feel like this is sort of the step that they've taken, that they've shortened the deal tenures. They want providers to drive more productivity. And they're really trying to drive more AI led investments to be able to achieve these innovation targets or these benefits that they're actually hoping to see from providers, right? So, if we get into more detail about AI-driven investments, what we have been seeing is that there's a lot of balance that we need to achieve between the risk that AI poses and the productivity that they want to achieve as a whole, right? So if we talk about just the last 2 years, they were really driven by experimentation, exploration. It was the hot new topic that you get to get more automation and all of these aspects, right? But now, what we've actually seen is that a lot of these AI POCs that we'd started and they had piloted, they haven't actually reached the production phase, right? We're still maybe piloting in some areas, but we've lost that sort of, I wouldn't say lost that charm, but I feel like we haven't been able to really achieve what we were so excited about in the last 2 years. So, what do you think about that? Do you agree, or do you feel that, no, it's going to come back?
Yeah, I think, Manasi, I at often at the risk of sounding a bit of a pessimist or someone who doesn't get excited about these things. I treat anything like these, like Gen AI automation back in the day, right? RP. I see this as really cool, really effective things, right? But I still see them as strong enablers, right? And not lift everything like one size fits all pedestal. It will come in, huff and puff their way through and create a trail of such transformation that everything will change, right? It doesn't happen that way. It's never really happened in history, and I don't think it's going to do that. So I think a few things with Gen AI as well, right? There's some clearly strong use cases for sure. Okay, very strong use cases. I think over there, there's a lot of promise. The success has been relatively more, right? And I think that those are the ways to first prove, rather than go and look for 50,000 other use cases, right? And that's contributing to the failure to reach production stage, because you try your hand at everything. It's good to do that, but let's not be disheartened by that. Let's keep things
Yeah.
realistic. But many questions I think to answer. One, enterprises themselves agree that they aren't prepared to take the overall risk, change of processes on their side, change of making the organizational change on their side. That's the first one. But then there's a lot of elements, like where to start, right? Which functions to start with, which use cases to target within those functions. A very important point, and this was actually in many solution workshops where clients are looking to engage with suppliers, this does come through, but maybe it doesn't make for great marketing content, so no one really talks about it a lot. Is that to achieve the same level of efficiency, right? There may be three ways to do it, right? Or two different ways. You could use Gen AI to do it, but then if the same results can be achieved using standard automation also, that would be 1/10 of the cost, right? Okay, maybe if it's like a 2% different in efficiency, but 1/10 of the cost, you have the answer,
Right.
right? So I think that prioritization also, everyone wants to get Gen AI. I don't care, but hey, what if a standard automation can get you practically the same results at a fraction of the cost? Why do you want to jump into that? And then the business case won't be met, and then it's going to be the same story.
Yeah.
So I think there are some of these elements which then get into things like, what's the ROI, the safety, do we have enough skills, what's the risk, what if there's a kind of some kind of a litigation that your model took something from another model. So there's a lot of other such potential cost additives, right? So let's say if you want a complete legal security, right, or data security, there's more layers towards it, right? So that's why I think, at least my personal belief is that yes, this has great promise, but now is the time to really maybe focus on a few things, get that done till completion, rather than use thinking that Gen AI will solve everything, under the sun.
Everything. It's the magic sauce, right? Gen AI
Yeah,
is the
yeah.
magic sauce. That was the sentiment that we were feeling. And
Sorry.
about costs, right? When we did the cost assessment, I think Abhishek, we were part of this, trying to talk to companies about what are the
Yeah,
actual costs they will face. Fine, they knew a lot about infrastructure costs. Those are the obvious ones, right? But there was so much cost involved in just training the model, the fine tuning of the model, that that exercise in itself was taking ages for them to achieve, right? And what we
that's
saw
correct.
was that only the smaller use cases, like I remember that within customer service, contact center agents, there
Yeah,
were a lot of use cases that we saw in marketing, all the interactive services we saw use cases. But if I talk about procurement, which is, the sort of department we're working with right now, we didn't see a lot of use cases within it itself, right? When it came to Gen AI, and there was a lot of experimentation, there was a lot of excitement about it, but nothing much that actually happened in it, right? P2P side, maybe yes, but not so much on the strategic sourcing side. And I think Abdul here is commenting saying human touch, which is so right in a lot of these elements, right? There was a lot of spend analysis that was happening through Gen AI, but then that entire exercise that needed to be translated into some actually, okay, what do we do with this spend analysis? This is actually accurate. That wasn't really happening. And that brings me, to another point that when we were discussing Gen AI as a technology and its evolution, currently we're just at the stage that it's sort of, yes, giving us answers, but it is not reaching that judgment intensive related answers, right? It's just giving you the answers that have been fed into it. It doesn't have that sort of what do you call it, judgmental behavior or trying to assess situations as of now. But I do know that explainable AI is on the rise. So maybe we'll see something more on that front going forward. But to your point, it's not going to disrupt everything. It's going to be very, very expensive if everyone wants to suddenly adopt it. So I think, yeah, that's just a couple of things that I had in mind. And of course, we've talked a lot about AI and we've talked a lot about what is happening in the market. But when we think about CPOs and how it's affecting them, they've also, been struggling a lot with the contracting aspects of it, the legal aspects, as you mentioned, how to work with business. And that is where I see a lot of challenges that are sort of coming up in the adoption of AI. All right. Now, I just wanted to jump back to the first few pointers that you mentioned, right, Abhishek, because I think those were really basic in terms of explaining what is actually happening in organizations. So, you mentioned a point around people cost management, where, suppliers are being sort of pushed to look at their rate cards, provide that optimum value to organizations. So, could you sort of tell me about the general pricing outlook that you see going forward for 2025, because I know that we've done some research and we've seen that as suppliers are still facing a lot of margin pressures as well. So how do you feel they'll be able to adopt that to their pricing rate cards?
Yeah, yeah, and effectively, I'll maybe go back 6 months, right? What we were kind of thinking, and projections are always estimates, right? None of us has an accurate crystal ball, so to speak. The trends in the first half of 2024, we thought that we are getting into a bit of a hockey stick curve where IT services growth, right, which means demand will increase, and that practically means deals will be faster. There'll be expansion in discretionary spend, and that's what causes generally rates to go up because it's a demand supply. People are looking for talent, and they're not finding it.
Yeah.
I think that while that hockey stick curve is coming through, it seems like an extended one. So it's not like an absolute V. It's like flattish first and then kind of going up. So what that means is that in first half of 2025, there's no signals that there's going to be a sudden increase in demand in the first half, right? So that's why, and then once demand starts, there's also a lag to when prices start to go up. It's almost like 3 to 6 months after that demand starts to come through.
Yeah.
So overall, if we'd say, I think in most cases we do expect prices to be relatively static, right? Especially for things in major kind of geographies like for IT services definitely static because, again, yes,
Hmm.
while there may be a drop in discretionary demand, good people in the technology space are still hard to find, especially when it comes to specific skills, modern skills, etc. Right? Where we actually see a bit of a drop coming through, okay, an actual decline in pricing, right, would be in things like voice-based BPS services and some degree of non-voice-based BPS services for especially in offshore locations, right? And I
Hmm.
think the simple reason being voice BPO, even otherwise, it's highly competitive, margins are low. So the moment there's a bit of a demand wobble, there is predatory pricing which comes up, because people want to, at least get people staffed, right? At least, contracts to come in so that the fixed cost gets covered. And same for, I think, non-voice BPS. There are elements around, not much kind of work flowing through. There's only that much you can do. So again, that because of that competition, there's one-upmanship in trying to kind of get to the best deal. So those are areas where, at least in offshore locations, we do see some degree of pricing kind of come down. Now, the cost of operations obviously do keep going up because especially in places like India or even some other places where the inflation is high, that kind of will go up. But then providers will have to be a bit smart with things like resource cycling, right? Getting their contracts to have sufficient buffer for cost of living adjustment, and of course looking at alternate talent pools. To be honest, things with processes which may have required like a full chartered accountant, they will have to see if they want to mix it with, like, someone who's not a full chartered accountant, just as an
Right.
example, or
Yeah.
or look at tier 2, tier 3 kind of cities, right, to be able to deliver.
Yeah. I think one of an interesting, sort of way I've seen organizations do this is also just looking at their entire seniority mix, right? Trying to see if they've staffed appropriately too many senior resources in a project that doesn't need so many senior resources. So all that is also something that is another, way that organizations are really looking at managing, or service providers are really looking at managing these rate cards, right? Because margin pressures will also always be there for them. It's not like, I mean, okay, they don't have those talent issues anymore, but they do have a lot of margin pressures, so to say. So I think these are very interesting points, Abhishek. What I also feel is that, there's a lot of talk around contracting going on, right? So different contracting models. We've always, I think it's been many years that we've been talking about, of course, the staffing, like TNM based models, output based models. We're also talking a lot about outcome based models for a long time. But do you feel that, let's say when we take outcome based models as a whole, firstly, I, in my experience, have not seen 100% outcome based deals in a lot of functions, right? I don't
Yeah.
think it's there in IT services. I don't think it's there in BPS. It's not there overall. There's always a hybrid sort of model wherein you're getting them to drive some outcomes, getting them to link those outcomes to your business. But even at a very strategic supplier level, I don't think that that is so common. Do you agree, or what do
I
you
would
think?
agree. It's very rare, Balaji, to see it. Maybe in some, for example, I don't even know if in APAC it's existing. There's some services within, for example, healthcare insurance in the US where payment integrity or something could be linked to that. But then that's a very different model.
Yeah.
Um, the only place where within APAC I've heard this happening could be for, let's say, utilities focused recovery, right, in Australia, right? I've heard cases where, or based on delinquency, timeline, how much you get.
Yeah.
But then that's a very, 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 high stress, high return kind of an environment. You're right. In everywhere else, it's got to be a bit hybrid.
Yeah, agreed, agreed. And when it comes to, just contracting, of course, there are a lot of other levers that we've seen, right? Not just contracting, right? But when it comes to pricing as well, how is it that, CPOs are able to drive beyond the typical pricing rate cards? I feel that there are also other, levers that they're able to use. So I was in
Hmm.
procurement, I was sort of working in a service provider company before this, and we used to use all these other levers when service providers were not able to give us those typical rate
Yeah.
cards that we asked for. So some of them being, of course, don't give us, let's say, give us some maybe offshoring link discounts. maybe you can give us some sole sourcing discounts, and so on and so forth. So a lot of these other areas are there where I feel procurement can leverage service providers to give them more savings, because ultimately you need to just show the impact on your savings KPI, which is the main KPI still for procurement.
That's correct. That's correct. And in fact, there's two elements. One could be savings, right? Of course, as you mentioned, better discounts of all shapes and forms. Either it's a cola waiver or something like that. There could also be things around how suppliers can help manage certain cash flow, right? For example, if
Right.
there's a certain investment, how does that get amortized, right, without any financing charges, right? Or with minimal financing charges, how to kind of, maybe delay the cash flow impact, etc. Because yes, maybe not directly from CPO, but then, as you know, CPOs are closely linked to CFOs as well. So sometimes at an organizational level, these things also come through, which may not be pure savings, but just in terms of the timing of cash flow, could be fairly important for an organization.
Yeah, like payment delayed payment terms,
Exactly,
discounts, so on
exactly,
and so forth, right?
exactly.
That is a great example, actually. That we used to leverage this a lot in our experience before this. I know that when we were working the practitioner side, this is a very hot one with organizations.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And these are some of the classics, right? Yeah.
I think
All
Manshi,
right.
sorry, there was also a question, right? So maybe we can,
Yeah, we will
about
continue.
explaining how AI and big data can help travel industry in specific when we are trying to solve the problem of reconciliation, more so on tax aspects. Yeah. So while I don't think we have a very specific answer to this. Having said that, some of the use cases which we are seeing in the travel industry, right? One is, of course, around agents, right? Having that kind of dynamic information available, the contact, all of that stuff. But then when it come some of those, and are the use cases fully developed? Maybe not. But especially in things in the, for example, in the airline industry, right, around kind of revenue accounting reconciliation, right, finding leakages, those aspects, I think there are some use cases being developed there. And and to the best of my knowledge, within travel tax, maybe that's a bit of a bit of a white space, right, for some organization to come in and actually develop that tool. Because I do know that there's significant interest, especially in the Indian GST kind of regime, to be able to kind of develop that. So yeah, in our experience, I think it's a bit of a white space currently, but any learnings from wider travel reconciliation, usage of AI to solve that, I think could be pretty helpful as this space grows.
Yeah, yeah. I think when we analyze the industry as a whole, a lot of, like I mentioned before also, there were some areas that were seeing a lot of use cases, but travel wasn't really one of them. And
Mhm.
also around, the sort of regulatory areas that had more of, legal security hassles, they had less adoption of big data and AI as compared to others that were more sort of free flowing and did not require so much compliance. Because once you have regulatory aspects that come into the picture, there are a lot of things in the organization that you need to align accordingly to be able to, adopt something which is a new technology. So, all right, great. I think we've talked a lot about pricing trends. We've talked a lot about maybe a little bit about contracting. Actually, we've talked about leveraging different locations, AI, productivity, all of these things, right? Now, what I wanted to do was just discuss a little bit around looking at your entire supplier portfolio as a whole, right? We've talked about, let's say, individual deals, pricing, rate cards, and all, but is there a way that procurement can look at the entire portfolio and see if there are ways to sort of drive rationalization initiatives? And if yes, are they driving it a lot these days? Because from the past year that we've been sort of studying the market, we've seen that okay, rationalization, consolidation has been a big theme, yes, across a lot of organizations. But there have also been focus on just rebalancing your supplier portfolio, making smarter work placement decisions, making sure that you have, let's say, if there's one critical project, you have a champion supplier and you have a challenger supplier so that you keep up the competitive intensity between the two of them. Right. So these are just some of the themes that I've been, observing in the market, and along with that, now going forward, what I'm also seeing a lot is that, portfolio, yes, that is also one thing, but there's a lot of integration within different types of deals. So your typical IT deals, they're being clubbed with your BPO deals, and that percentage has increased by a large ratio, right? That those integrated outsourcing deals are becoming more and more common. Why is that? Because, of course, you're getting a lot of commercial synergies out of it, but you're also getting a lot of, you're becoming the customer of choice for your supplier, right? Which is giving you so many other benefits in terms of that innovation that you always wanted to drive with them, but you were not able to because they were not prioritizing you that much. But with these type of billion-dollar deals, we see that, okay, that prioritization is happening. You're becoming the preferred customer. You're getting all the leadership level connects. You're getting them to, sort of focus on your business objectives as a whole and come up with different ideas on how those can be driven. So these are just some themes that I've been seeing in the market. Abhishek, what do you think? Like, do you feel that, you've also been seeing that in the clients that you've been speaking to, or some different sentiment over here?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think in terms of supplier portfolio, there's I think different clients sometimes seem to be at different stages of the cycle, right? In terms of consolidation, right? And then one of the trends which we've seen this year is interesting, is that and this is generally among the larger ones who've had strategic relationships with three to four tier ones over many years. It's basically to try and explore enhanced relationships with tier two or tier three suppliers, right? Go through a detailed process, right? uh, and that's basically for two reasons. One is to see if they can get the level of attention and a better quality of resource, right? And
Right,
second is from a cost optimization perspective, right? Because
right.
many of the relatively smaller players, while they do serve a number of blue chip clients, but it may be totally ad hoc. So if they can get a chance to play a major role in a larger portfolio, it just leads to a lot more street cred, so to speak, right? To say that, hey,
Yeah,
we've got 600 people working for top 10 bulge bracket bank, right? I'm just as an example, right? So the kind of creds it gives now, even if that may be low margin or no margin, the amount of strategic benefit, there's a concept in economics called a positive externality, right? Many airlines run by governments run on the principle of positive externality. They might be in losses, but the overall business benefit it brings to the economy is way more. So I see some of these strategic sharp pricing investments as positive externalities. So that's also something which is being seen quite seriously by clients to optimize or their overall portfolio.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's where I think we were also speaking, to a client yesterday, and they were talking about the fact that, it takes so much cost to like set up your internal functions to be able to drive these type of initiatives. And the way we sort of see it internally is that it's not about cost, right? It's about the great amount of value that you can get out of these type of initiatives. I mean, you cannot put a sort of measurement to the large
Yeah.
amount of benefits that you'll be getting out of these things. It's not a cost savings, it's so much more, right? These type of things bring a lot more value. And even on the risk side, right, there's so much, you're sort of setting up these type of functions, or you're setting up good initiatives. There's so much, risk management, brand reputation, preservation that you sort of doing with having
Yeah.
these type of initiatives in place. So yeah, I think with that, what I wanted to do was sort of give an offer to the audience that we have here. So there is a complimentary price check that we're offering from Everest Group side, in which you'll be able to sort of select three roles of your choice and the geographies of your choice, and you'll be able to get some rate cards from us, because we do a lot of price benchmarking, right? Abhishek's team is sort of an expert in that area. They have a lot of price benchmarks across geographies, offshore, nearshore, onshore. So we are giving you that option on a complimentary basis, just to select a few roles, and we'll be able to provide rates for those particular roles to you. So do click. We've posted a link in the chat. Do click on it and do select the roles of your choice, and we'll take it from there. All right. So Abhishek, I think, one more thing probably we can talk about today, and then we'll sort of, try to, wrap up this discussion as well. But this is a key sort of area that we have to discuss is internal challenges that CPOs are facing as a whole, right? Because, of course, we spoke a lot about external market issues today, but I feel that even within an organization, CPOs are facing so many challenges. These are internal budget constraints. I spoke a little bit about cost that, CPOs are always asked to justify the cost of their function. And these are the type of questions they're asking, like how do we sort of justify a business case for getting this sort of technology or something like that. So overall, how do you feel about the procurement function? Do you feel that, it's sort of only to be looked at from a cost perspective? And are there other challenges you see within procurement departments that they're really struggling with right now and not able to achieve their objectives because of it?
Yeah, yeah. And I think I agree. So if I were to look at one of the functions, right, within any organization which can have a significant impact, right? Because especially, I mean, consider any large organization, there's so many things which they will not produce or create themselves, be it direct, indirect. There's just so much of, mind to do. And with while yes, overall things have become sophisticated, it still takes a lot of skill to make sure that whatever is being procured, right, is at the right level of specification, right, especially services, right, and the right contract terms with the right flexibility at the right price, so that and it's not just getting the cheapest price, it's the most optimum price, right? There's many
Right.
cases where, and people I'm sure have burnt their fingers by taking on things which appear too good to be true and then figuring out, oh my god, now if you need to
Yeah.
get it to the spec that we wanted, you need to pay through your nose to get it there.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things I think very important would be around how sophisticated procurement organizations build their business case and keep on kind of tracking not just how much impact they've created, but how much of that additional investment, be it in technology, be it in analytics, be it in research, be it in external support needed, could actually help them get it. And I've seen that wherever organizations have kept that loop to be really smart, really strategic, I think that does get it, because eventually even across different organizations, procurement organizations are competing, right, against one another, right, to get the best deal from suppliers.
Right.
So the example which I take is basically, if you are overpaying any of your suppliers, you're practically cross subsidizing your competition, because they will take that extra profit and give a much better price, right, to your competitor who may be coming to the same provider. And I've personally seen this, right, in the same industry, same provider, same work, so much of difference. And this was an exact word which I used to the category leader of that organization, that you're practically cross subsidizing the company with an office which is 2 blocks down the lane, right, head office.
Oh.
So I think that's where you have to spend money to save money.
Yeah.
So how to get that, I think is a bit of an art and a skill.
Yeah, and it is a race on both ends. It's not just the
Yeah.
providers, right? It's on both sides. And I think a lot of I feel that a lot of challenges happen when procurement just does not have its data in place. So there will be, let's say, one supplier and lots of functions will be sourcing from that particular supplier, but there's not much awareness about the fact that, okay, there's so much silos within our organization itself. And these are large companies, right? These tech giants that we work with, they have different procurement units. All of them are sourcing from different suppliers, and there's not a centralized sort of database where you can see that, oh, we have so much spent with this one particular supplier, and we can just leverage the relationships we have with different business units and different procurement departments and sort of get it all together and consolidate it in one go, right? So one challenge is, of course, that you want to get the best rates on your end, but have you seen what you have within the organization itself? Have you been able to leverage those type of synergies inside? That's also a key sort of lever that you can use within your own organization. And I feel that, so again, coming back to the survey that, we was talking about, CPO survey that we did this year, what we've seen is that generally when we compare procurement to other departments, procurement does get a smaller share of the investment pie, especially for transformation initiatives. And when I talk about other departments, I'm talking about finance, I'm talking about HR, I'm talking about, operations. So the data really sort of tells that, okay, procurement gets a small share of the investment pie. But having said that, there's a lot of digital transformation that we're still seeing within procurement, not just in the form of small use cases, but also large tech collaborations. In fact, I think we had, a client recently. They're based out of New Zealand, and they've transformed their entire procurement function very recently, right? It's been like a 2-year initiative. They, of course, had the typical S2P suites and everything in place. But what they've done is they've identified the gaps that they had within the S2P suite and gotten best of breed solutions to fill in those gaps. So it's not just that, you're sort of creating different sort of units to have different data in every small system. They've created this entire database, and they've integrated it with their general S2P suite to consolidate everything that they had at a global level. And I was actually looking recently, and they've won some award for it as well. And I thought that yes, you do deserve an award, because this is something that is really amazing. And you've been able to achieve a lot of data integration within such a large global organization as a whole. So yeah, a lot of benefits to digital transformation. Lot of resilience that you can build through digital transformation within procurement, and great point that you mentioned about being able to sort of get that benefit with the suppliers themselves, right? So yeah, I think these are just some of the challenges that we saw that procurement were facing and how they have been sort of filling the gaps. Now, I think what we can do is just, if there are any sort of general themes that we wanted to discuss in the market as well, Abhishek, like what is the market sentiment going forward? What do we feel? We spoke about pricing, right? But when we speak about the market as a whole, the outsourced services market, which is something that Everest Group is very closely looking at, do we feel that the IT services market, the business process services market, are they sort of going on a rise? Are they, how do you feel that that market is coming up? Do you feel outsourcing is increasing as a whole, or do you feel that work is moving more towards captives? I think we can talk a little bit about that, and then probably we can,
Yeah.
close the discussion for today. Yeah.
Yeah. So interestingly, I mean, if we look at the overall IT services kind of, market, and which means basically the revenues to providers, right? We do expect that to go up in 2025 for sure. Like I said, that okay, the pace of change also, right? Not just the growth. I mean, the revenue obviously goes up, but it's about the percentage growth, right? Year-on-year percentage growth, how much you're getting. Um,
Yeah.
I think that is going to be that is definitely going to increase, right? Now, the pace of that is likely to be subdued in the first half, right? More likely
Yeah.
to now get up. And the hope that gives us generally, if we look at worldwide, right? Here we're talking about APAC, but then there is a trickle effect on everything from larger economies, right, in the West, right? So in an election year, generally people are subdued, waiting for the results and then planning accordingly, right now. So hopefully 2025 should have that stability, right? I think one of the things which is going to be interesting is that yes, GCCs are a major, I won't call it a threat, or a major nuance coming in as part of the delivery mix. But the good news for providers is that there's enough and more of work that they can do in the setup and operations of these GCCs as well.
Yeah.
So it's not just about, hey, the GCC has taken away all of the work and they're doing it internally. Clients need a lot of support to help accelerate their GCC setup. Build, operate, transfer. The number of conversations, engagements I've been part of in the past 12 to 18 months have been more than the number of times I've heard the word BOT in the past 20 years of my career, right? So it's that level of interest, and it seems to be continuing. So there's a lot of whatever perceived loss of work that, hey, is going to a GCC, there's enough and more to be made upfront during the setup for providers. So I think that's also going to contribute. Now, will it make like a huge difference in revenue? Perhaps not, but it'll definitely be a contributor to the revenues of IT service providers. And what I also know is that whenever providers help set up something, there is a lot of downstream work that comes through, right? Because they know the ins
Definitely.
and outs of the center, right? So,
Yeah.
and in case of an eventual carve out 5 7 years from now, they're pretty well placed, so they could actually earn this money and then get back into delivering that business 4 years from now. So
Right. It's a cycle, right? And I feel that there's always a lot of, okay, in-house versus outsource sort of debate that keeps going on, or, GCC versus outsourcing. But there's not, if we actually look at the percentages of, increased number of GCCs or increased number of outsourcing, the percentages do not differ that much, right? That there's a sort of 30% increase in outsourcing, there would probably be a 33 or 35% increase in GCC setups, but the difference is not much. We're doing both, right? Organizations are leveraging both of these methods to sort of set up. So there's not a one versus another. And agree to your point that service providers are really able to help with these GCC setups. So more revenue for them on that front. Bot models are really on the rise. All right. So I think we've discussed a lot of points today, Abhishek. Just, if I wanted to give a quick summary, I think we've discussed so much about pricing trends. We've discussed about, offshore delivery mixes. We've discussed about deal tenures, how they're shaping up going forward, CPO, internal challenges, contracting, all of these aspects. Now, if I just have to sort of, close this discussion today, I think the thing that we started with was cost, right? Cost optimization, that was key. Risk management, that was the second aspect that we discussed, right? Now, if we see CPOs as a whole, focusing on these particular aspects, all the things that we've spoken about are multiple levers that you can use to achieve your cost objectives, right? To drive your year-on-year savings target. And all the time making sure that your service providers are happy, you get the best rates from them, and you're able to sort of get them as your good partners going forward, because that is the value that you're not able to measure, right? Like Abhishek mentioned, you can get those cost objectives, but you will not be able to see the struggles that you're going to face going forward, right? If you don't think about value as a whole in these strategic partner engagements. So I think with that, I think we can close our discussion for today. It has been great talking to you this morning, Abhishek, and thank you so much for joining. Everyone who joined, thank you for asking your questions. And yeah, I think all good for the day. What do you think, Abhishek? Any parting comments from your end?
likewise, no, Varshini, I think you captured it well. It's what I'd like to think is that I'm glad that 2024 turned out to be a bit of a non-eventful year, right? While there was
Yeah,
no sudden spurge in spend and great work, touchwood, there were also no major shocks like complete shutdown of spend, right? So sometimes a bit of that stability is good. I'm actually hopeful about 2025 that the overinvestment maybe of the COVID time frame got subdued, but then people realize that they're getting left back. So as more of that kind of focus comes through, hopefully that we should see some interesting times for the industry.
definitely. Very positive outlook for the next year. And I think someone has commented saying also positive, right? So we're all on the same page. Great. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate it.